So welcome, Professor Naidu and all the staff who are here. Warm welcome on behalf of our Fale staff who are here this morning. So we would like to continue to strengthen that. We know we are leading in the university in terms of flexible learning and online program, and so we want to know more how we can strengthen our learning and teaching, and how we can work with you, to strengthen this, particularly particularly for regional students who are, find it quite difficult sometimes to be able to journey with them. So with those welcome, and now I will invite you to share with us.
Thank you.
So just before that, this morning we will have Professor to share with us, and then we will all share the morning tea, and then we will have our executive committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Akanishi. Thank you very much, and thank you all for the opportunity, the invitation. Akanishi and I were students at this place, many, many years ago. That reveals our age a little bit, but that's all right, nothing secret there. I come here, one of the things, first of all, is that what I'm going to talk about is not new. Extension services or anything to do with flexible learning began here in this school. There was no extension services before. It was a department in the Faculty of Education in the 70s, in the early 70s, with John Carroll, I think, as the de facto head. I think he was the head of department. This is even before extension services got established as a separate unit down in the middle campus. So I come here with a bit of nostalgia, but with a bit of trepidation as well, because I feel like I'm in the Dean's Den. That this is the place where teaching is talked about. You guys are the experts in teaching and learning, and I'm here to talk to you, or with you, about teaching and learning. So I feel like I'm in two minds. One is I'm a bit cautious, careful about what I might say, because you guys are the subject matter experts in this area. And two, because I also feel the other side of the coin is that I feel honored to be here, because I think we are the change makers in relation to teaching and learning, as opposed to just being a subject matter expert in teaching and learning or education generally. I think it is imperative for a group like this, and I'm glad that Matthew, it worked out this way, that I'm talking to the executive group as opposed to the bigger group, that I think this group of people needs to step up a little bit in terms of teaching and learning at the university, because not only because you're the subject matter experts, because education is our core business, isn't it? And I feel like, I'm talking to a group of people who are going to be partners in that process. So like you said, Akanishi, I come here with my team, there's Javed there, there's Val there, there's Varun there, and there's Deepak there, and Navi on the recorder. And these people will chip in and answer your questions. But I don't want to be bogged down in this presentation about operational things, about why Moodle's not working, why Moodle's down, or what are the services we provide, because you know what the services we provide. We multimedia, course development, all those sorts of things. I really want to have a conversation about some of the big picture items that Dean, you'll be familiar with, and the heads will be familiar with, that are doing the rounds in the meetings at this university and SMT. So I sort of titled this presentation that way, because I think that what I'm talking about, we're going to be talking about, is about strengthening teaching and learning at this university, whichever discipline it might be. And we all know these objectives that are there, which are our starting point. You've seen them in the strategic plan. So I mean, that's the starting point, and everything falls down from there. So I'll just quickly move on from there. Two things that I did when I came here last March, and it's been about like 9 or 10 months, is to get two policies done. When I arrived here, DVC told me to start thinking about a policy on flexible learning, and I thought, this university has been in the business of distance education and flexible learning since 1970, and you want a policy now? And I'm thinking, okay, I'll do a policy. So we started doing a policy, and there is a policy now on flexible learning. And I'm glad we did that, because it gave us an opportunity to think about our history, our trajectory, you know, and all the things that we have done in the past to where we are now and how technology features into it. And the other thing that they asked me to do was to do a policy on open educational resources. Now again, open education is nothing new. I mean, we are in the business of open learning. This is not an open university, it's a dual mode university. But open education is a large part of what we do because of the nature of this university. It's not in one country, it's in a region. So these two policy documents have been through the committees and now in the Senate. And a large part of my goal is to go around the university and now talk about these policies to make sure that people know it's there. Many people don't know it's there, where it is, how to find it, and what does it say. And I think we need to have that conversation. So I'm trying to gather momentum and gather you and take you along with me so that you become part of I can't do it by myself, so that you will be helping me. So let's talk about the first policy a little bit.
So if you can, we'll just welcome Sean, the Deputy Head of School of Emma. He's from the Emma. Thank you. We can see you clearly. Sean, good morning there.
How are you?
Good morning.
Okay, good on you, Sean. Just to avoid wasting too much time on this, you know, the flexible learning policy says that, you know, basically it offers the parameters for the adoption and integration of flexible learning and teaching strategies at the university, and it's in the policy library. It can be also accessible from, it is also accessible from the CFL website, so you can see it and you can find it. Now, I just want to go through some of the things about flexible. I'll slow down a little bit because oftentimes, you know, a lot of people have different perceptions of flexible learning, put it that way. And the way we have captured the essence of flexible learning in this policy is that flexible learning is a state of being. It's a state of mind, isn't it? And I think right up front, we need to position ourselves in terms of where we are and what is our conception and perception of flexibility. Generally, when we talk about flexible learning, you know, people think in terms of time, place, and pace. All right, you don't have to come to the lecture. You can listen to the lecture at various times. You know, you can study at different places. This was the foundation of distance education. But flexible learning can mean many more things, you know, and if we think about it, and this is why I feel privileged to be talking to you guys, because you know all of these things. You should know all of these things. And in terms of learners, it could mean that we could allow people to enter at different points in a course of study, exit at different points in a course, a choice of activities, a choice of assessment tasks, a choice of resources. Now this is really pushing the boundaries, isn't it? Take, for example, any course, you know, take a course on leadership and Lingam in your course. Now, does a student in that course have choices of assessment items, resources to study? Can they come in at different times and go out at different times? Now, this is really pushing the boundaries, but when you think about flexibility, you might want to aspire to those kinds or the levels of flexibility. But then you might turn around and say, so, you know, if I offer those kinds of flexibilities, it's just gonna, you know, blow the workload for me. How am I gonna manage all these guys doing different kinds of things? Those are realistic concerns and reasonable concerns. And I think that, you know, we have to think about that. This is why flexibility and flexible learning is not a fixed entity. You know, flexibility in courses will differ. And there were different kinds and different levels of flexibility in different kinds of courses. In some courses, you will require people to be in the place at that time, on the spot, all the time. And that's fine, you know. Similarly for teachers, in relation to the allocation of time, mode, and methods, one of the strongest, you know, things in favor of flexible learning, online education, distance education has been that, you know, you don't have to show up at 8 o'clock to give a lecture. You know, why do you need to come at 8 o'clock and give a lecture? You can give a lecture at any time from wherever you are. And students can listen to that lecture anytime, wherever they are, and many more times. So if you think about what does flexibility mean in terms of what it can do for the learner and what it can do for the teacher, you know, there's a whole variety of things that we can think about. The other point that I think that is critical here is then it begs the question, why bother, son? Why bother with this level of flexibility? Why make things so complicated? And I think it goes to a value principle, isn't it? And I'm talking to the converted here. This university is in a very unique situation, you know. I worked for 13 years at Melbourne University, research intensive university, campus based, students come there and they usually, high school finishing marks are usually 95% plus anyway. So, you know, all of them are going to succeed. So what does the university do? Just like Harvard, you know, the difficulty is getting into Harvard. Once you get into Harvard, you're going to get through anyway. So the point that I'm making is that this university is very different from those kinds of organizations. It was set up, many people might argue, like the UK Open University, as the social, you know, a goodwill gesture to offer education to a group of people who would not have any opportunity anyway. This is how the United Kingdom Open University was set up by the Labour government at that time, to make education available to people who couldn't get access to education in the formal education system. So USPs are very much like that. Even though students are able to come to the USP campus here in Lodala and other campuses, there are many people who still cannot come to those campuses, even to 50 years after. So, you know, we have to think about what flexibility and flexible learning and openness mean to us. It's a value principle. It's just like equality. Do we believe in equality or not? Do we believe in flexibility? You don't ask the question that should I convert this course into flexible learning or not? It's imperative that you do. How you do it, how much you do it is an academic decision. So some things, for example, in engineering, in sciences, you might say, I'm sorry, it's more economical for you to come here to do the lab work rather than do the lab work in a variety of places. So this is why I keep saying that the engine room of teaching and learning is the school, is the faculty. These are the guys who need to be in charge of it. We, our team here, are the facilitators. We are the enablers, right? We provide the technology, we support the technology, we supply the infrastructure and support the infrastructure. But the thinking around what is flexible, what is not flexible, how flexible, who is to decide how flexible it should be, how open it should be taking place in the discipline base, in the faculties, in the schools, because that's where the subject matter expertise is. So I think the point that I'm trying to make in that slide is that it's a value principle, and one size does not fit all. You know, what engineering might do would be quite different from what law might do, what education might do, what's possible. And by the way, education was the leader, was the head of the pack, you know, to move into this area. You know, I'll put him there. Flexible learning. What I'm saying is core business of this university. Without being flexible and open, we can't achieve our mandate. We can't achieve our goals the way the University of the South Pacific was set up. And I keep saying, and basically what I've said there, the responsibility sits with the faculties in the schools, and the decisions need to be made about that. So what I keep saying is that those decisions then need to filter out to the service units like the Flexible Learning Unit, IT services, and other places to implement those. But the intellectual decision, the conceptualization of what is flexibility and what is openness should emanate from within the schools and the faculties, because it's a core business. It's not something that CFL does. It's something that the schools do, the discipline experts do. Another extension of that thinking is presented here when in the policy you have these 8 levels of flexibility. So furthermore, if you want to think about flexibility, you can think of flexibility along those lines. For example, the design of the learning experience. You know, the communication or the interaction of the learner with the subject matter content, whether it's a textbook or a website or a reading, you know, is there flexibility within that? And the interaction between the learner and the teacher, the interaction between the learner and the learner. And then the 5th one is the learning environment. And the 6th one is assessment activities, feedback. And then there is this engagement of the learner with the organization. So if you want to think about flexibility, you can think along those 8 dimensions. And if say if you want to do an audit of your course, or a discipline or set of courses, and say, how flexible are we along those dimensions? Ask that question. Might be a good idea to think about. And then it gives us an opportunity to think about, you know, how you don't have to be flexible or as flexible on all those dimensions in the same manner. That in certain cases, for example, learner interaction with the content, with the subject matter, could be done differently, as opposed to, say, the learner interaction with the feedback. How do we provide feedback? Is feedback provided only in one way or in several ways, so that different students and different kinds of students can access feedback? For example, in one of the things we're trying to do in Moodle is to give you the facility to give audio feedback. So you don't have to write a lot of stuff. Sometimes, not quite often, I think, not sometimes, you know, students actually want to hear the voice of the teacher. They want to hear it from the teacher. They don't want to hear it from other students. Yeah? You know, if Lingam says so, it must be right then, right? You know? And I think there's a lot of literature about this, that, you know, we go on and on about discussion forums and how students can learn from each other. But if you ask the students say, no, I want to listen to the teacher. Because, I mean, I paid a lot of money. I came here. You teach. You're supposed to teach, so teach. Don't tell me to go and learn by some. This is the other conundrum. Say, take responsibility for own learning. Doesn't mean that students go and learn by yourself. Well, if I'm going to learn by myself, why did I come to the university? What did I pay for? So I think, you know, we need to think about those kinds of things, isn't it? So feel free to interject, please, you know, and raise a question or query if it is potent at the time, rather than keep it for later. I want to shift gears quickly to the other policy, which is on the policy library, is the open educational resource. Now, the resources policy. Now, this is a newer development. The concept of open education is not new. That was part of the distance education phenomenon that we have seen before. But open educational resources is slightly new thing, you know, about a decade or so. And this is, again, coming out of the same ethos and belief system about making educational resources freely available, particularly at this time when a lot of the costs of a lot of the materials are exorbitantly high. So there's a group of people, or a large group of people, a growing number of people who are pushing the agenda that educational resources should be made freely available for students. And hence we are talking about educational resources, open educational resources. And what are these? These are basically educational resources that are differently licensed. Now there's a bit of misconception about this. You know how at universities, especially, we pride ourselves in our intellectual capital, right? What we know is our property. What we know is our product. That's what we sell. we sell what we know to people. Come and get it, pay a bit of money for it, whatever we say, whatever they say, and that's why people come to these universities. So our intellectual capital is our product, is our currency, all right? Now, and therefore, you know that we have normally kept that under wraps and cover. We write something, we produce something, we put our name on it and put a C on it and say, you can't use it unless you pay a bit of money on it, or you can't have access to it, you can't copy it. I mean, there's merit in that argument, you know, there is value in that argument, but the flip side of that argument is that, you know how the developing world, much of that literature, much of that knowledge comes from the developed world. And if that educational resource is not made available to those who don't have it, then you're never going to bridge the divide. You're never going to bridge the divide. The developed will always be developed, and the developing will always be developing. And so, if you think about it from that point of view, then making educational resources freely available at no cost or minimal cost to the developing context is an imperative. It's a value principle. Do you believe in this or not? You know? And that's where this thinking about educational resources, open educational resources, is coming from. It is not taking away your IP. This is a misconception. Your name is still on it. It's still yours, but you license it differently. As opposed to putting a C and a circle around it, you have a CC, and there are various levels of licensing that people have, librarians have come up with. And I'm not going to go through that because all of this is in that policy. So have a look at that policy and tell your colleagues about it, tell your departmental colleagues about it. But you see, again, I'm saying these things without going to the slide, that it's a value principle, you know. I mean, we were always in the business of open access. We wanted to make education available to people from wherever they are and whoever they are. In open learning, the value principle is about freedom and flexibility, you know. We are not in the Harvard, Melbourne University environment. We are in the USP environment, right? And this third thing is about open scholarship. This is a very contentious issue because our intellectual capital is our property. How much are we willing to share this freely and openly with other people? So this is something that I think we as academics have to really think about. As an institution, we've got to think about how much are we willing to share with other people. You know, for example, you know, I've heard people say, you know, if we put my materials online, you know, other people are going to use it. You know, other people are going to just download it. You develop a fantastic course on Pacific literature, and some guy at Melbourne University downloads and uses it and makes their own. Now, do you have a problem with it? No. Well, you don't have a problem with it. Other people might say, hey, I developed it, you can't take it, you know. So this is a value principle. This is the point about scholarship, you know. How much are you willing to share and with whom and how? And I think this is something that we need to have a conversation about and decide how it's going to happen. So in this open educational policy is really grounded in that kind of thinking. But you know, having said all of those nice things, you might say, how is this going to be rolled out? You educate the academic staff, and I've heard this, people who say, well, you better make sure that Moodle's working, right? You know, or the technology is available. Sure, we agree with all of that. And I think the university recognizes that. So we're doing the best we can. That a wide range of resources is going to be available for you. And but the development of the curriculum and the assessment and the evaluation of learning, assessment of learning and the evaluation of learning experiences should still remain in the schools and the faculties. There's a couple of, I could take a little bit of breather if you have a point to raise here, but if you don't, you know, then I'll push on. So those are the two policies that are now accepted by the university, and I think it is imperative that we, as senior academics at this university and heads of schools, engage with those policies, because and not cast in stone. You can change policies. So unless you implement it or start beginning to implement it, you know what is working or not working. So hopefully over the next several months, in semesters, in years, we'll see how it's working, and then if it needs revision, we'll have to revise it. But one thing is very clear, the writing's on the wall, that flexibility and openness is the norm, is the name of the game as far as teaching and learning is concerned at this university, internationally as well, but more so at this university. So get on with it, get used to it, and get engaged with it. But you can't avoid it, because that is consistent with the ethos and culture of this university in particular. So that's the bottom line, and that's my key message, I think. There's a couple of things we're doing to roll this out across the university. One of the things that we have done is SMT gave CFL, or gave me $200,000, not to put in my pocket, but to disperse it to academics, to incentivize them to engage in the development of courses using only OER. Remember, when you go to the OER policy, it says that every time you start developing a course, the first thing you should start doing is, when you're looking for resources, look for open educational resources first. The policy says that. Then, if you can't find open educational resources, you go to copyright material. Nobody's saying that you only use open educational resources, but your preference, your choice should be open educational resources. That's what the policy says. So to incentivize that, what we have done is given small amounts of money to academic staff to start thinking about revising their courses. Now we've got 24 projects on the run here. About 8 or 9 of them are open textbooks. We write textbooks all the time. So CFL is going to support you guys to write a textbook. Say you want to write a textbook on Pacific literature. You got a chance here. We'll provide you with the technology. You write it, your IP is yours, it's your book. But we're going to disseminate it, produce it as an open educational resource, which means that people can use it, download it, modify it if they want to. But depending on what kind of license that we give, there's 6 licenses in this category. You can say you can change it, but you've got to license it in the same way I've licensed it. Or you can change it, but you can't use it for non-commercial purposes, or sell it or make money out of it. So it gives you a bit more, levels of flexibility in the Creative Commons licensing framework, as opposed to the conventional licensing framework. So all of this is explained in the policy. You can go there and have a look at it. Now, this is the initiative that we're trying to do. Deepak Bhartu there, sitting right behind you, is the man in charge. Now, we have reclassified his position to name it as an open education design architect. So his job is to work with academics and to help academics design open educational resources, amongst other things. And by the way, one of the things that we are trying to do on March 15th to celebrate the Open Education Week is to have an event at the ICT Center, which I hope that many of you will attend. We had an event last year. I remember, Anne, you were there, weren't you? We're going to do it again, and some of you will be able to present some of the work that you're doing or you're thinking, or be part of a conversation. And this website has a whole bunch of information. We're also trying to develop a repository. So any open educational resource that you develop will be based there with the help of the library, and can be disseminated more freely throughout the world, not just...
So can I just ask a question there? You've got open education website. Does that mean that there's a place where staff can go to find resources that
Yes.
Are available to everybody? So that is the website.
That's just what I said. You missed the second part of what I said. We are developing a repository which is at that website. It's like a database of open educational resources.
Database.
Like a portal.
Okay,
Yes.
I was going to ask that.
Yes.
Portal database, because we're hoping to do that to EdTerrec, our resource center.
Yeah.
So that staff can digitize in various areas, in social sciences, education in primary, in secondary.
Yeah.
We've been trying that. It's in the process.
Yeah.
So I think in that way,
Yeah.
it does help staff to know what is available
Yeah.
and what they can access, and immediately, they can
Yeah.
go to with that. But
Eh.
I think that is very interesting, and that is the way to go should staff, because they're busy. If they have that and it's categorized into the various
Yeah.
disciplines,
Yeah.
it does help
Yeah.
staff who
Yeah.
want to go there.
Yeah, if you want to do one for your own faculty, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't have to be one database, one repository. You know.
We're already starting with education, because
Yeah.
that was part of the plan of setting up TERA.
That's right.
We want to do it with our new person who's been appointed, who's actually, very good at it. He'll be starting next week. That will be his first task, to do that, so that we can link with you.
Yep.
This is why we're having this conversation. How can we link with you
Yep.
so that we are journeying together?
Varun there is the head of the learning technology section. He's set up the database. The database doesn't have very much at the moment, but it's functional. And over a period of time, we'll collect more information. I mean, these kind of repositories like this exist around the world. There's many. There's a dozen around these places. The more the better. It doesn't have to, everything doesn't have to be in one place. So you can have your own, FBE can have its own, FSTE can have its own, and then we have one, and somehow or the other, not somehow or the other. These can be all linked, they can be all linked. So you can jump from one to the other by way of just a link, which means, like, if somebody comes to your repository, there should be a way of finding that repository, so that something cannot be found in your place can be found there. Now we can do that, It's a matter of design. Now, so this is what I was talking about. We've got funding. We've got 3 categories of funding. We're revising existing courses, creating new courses, and publishing textbooks. But again, one of the things that I am pushing from the CFL perspective, and you guys are my partners in this process, is to think about teaching and learning and technology-enhanced teaching and learning in a scholarly way, to promote this idea of the scholarship of teaching and learning, so that you could rise to the level of being a professor with excellence in just teaching. Now, there are many universities in Australia which are actually creating 2 categories of staff. So if you don't want to be a research-intensive staff, you don't have to be in order to rise up the ranks. You can be an education-focused staff, like Monash University does. And I worked at Monash for 2 years, working with people like that, who can rise up to the level of professor with on the basis of their scholarship in teaching and learning, provided there is evidence in their scholarship of teaching and learning. And these include, pursuing your teaching with a level of complexity that involves designing innovative experiences along the lines that we were talking about earlier, use of technology, investigating, collecting data, and writing them rigorously and getting them published in very high quality peer-reviewed journals or outlets like that. Now, that is possible. It's happening. There are people who choose to do those kinds of things, as opposed to following a research intensive track in a discipline area, let's say, for example. Well, in this case, education is the discipline area. So the scholarship of teaching is very much core business in this place, I think, So this whole thing about open educational resources, I'm pursuing it with those kinds of questions in mind. For example, some of the questions we're asking is, do we know if there's a reduction in costs, What are the... Some people might say, why should I bother with open educational resources apart from that goodwill gesture? Does it really improve learning and teaching? Does it enable students to do things differently than if I were not using open educational resources? And what are the shift in perceptions? One of the things that I would like to see by the time I leave this place is to see where we are in terms of our perceptions of flexible learning and open educational resources. And in 2 years' time, where is the barometer? Where are we? One side of the scale or the other? Have we shifted? Do we believe a bit more now in engagement with flexible learning and open educational resources or open scholarship? Or are we stuck in that paradigm where you say, if you want it, come and get it from where I am? Isn't it? And what are the impacts of mentoring teachers, you know? So, and what are the impacts on the cost of the university, on reduction in the cost of the university? So these are critical issues, because we were talking a while ago, we're saying that even though you prescribe textbooks, many a times it's not compulsory for students to buy textbooks. And oftentimes, and I was one of those, we would forego. We wouldn't buy a textbook because it's expensive. We somehow or the other manage. We either borrow, or we take an old edition, or we share, you know. And we know that a lot of students are doing that. And the argument some people are making is that in order to ensure that every student has the book that they should have, how are we going to do that? Because you can't force it. You can't force people to buy it, because that would be, you know, going beyond the the duty. What the word I'm looking for is reasonable expectations, I would think, you know, isn't it? Because you can't force people to do anything, right? If they don't want to do it. So we are pursuing that agenda. The other initiative is this idea of learning analytics. I think in this day and age, with increasing use of technology, we need and we have access to more and more data about the behavior of students, the behavior of teachers. And what we have done is created a position at CFL in the name of a learning analytics engineer. And the job of this person is to watch and interrogate data that is being routinely collected by systems like Moodle and Mahara and other kinds of things. So that this kind of data gathering is nothing new. You know, we academics have always collected data. We thrive on collecting data. And so what we are talking about here is nothing new. But what we haven't been doing is collecting data on the learning experiences of students in order to inform decisions about flexible learning and open education and other kinds of things, and the rollout of textbooks and open educational resources. So somebody needs to collect this data. Somebody needs to get on the ball about this. And I think this is something where CFL can help. And this is why we have created a position of a learning analytics engineer. So this is not just about collecting data, it's about engineering data, about using data to engineer decision making. This is why we've called it the way we've called it. The other big thing that I've noticed since I've been here is that we don't really have a handle on the perceptions, the perspectives, and the practices of staff and students and staff about technology use. We don't know really what students have and what staff have, what they're capable of, what they're doing. So what we've started to do is to develop a survey that can be rolled out, you know, on a longitudinal basis, so that we collect data from staff and students about not only just what they have and what they're using for their work, but what they think about these technologies, so that, you know, 5 years' time, we can then say, look where we were in 2018, and look where we are now in terms of what our students are doing, what our staff are doing. I think that, you know, there's a lot to be done on the staffing side of the equation, as well as on the student side of the equation. So this is the other big thing that we're doing. And very soon you will see a very complete picture of a very large number, hopefully, of participants on what is the lay of the land in terms of technology use, adoption, perception, that kind of thing. And we are not developing this questionnaire ground up. We are using a questionnaire that was developed by EduCourse in the US, partly for two reasons. One is because somebody's done the work, so why redo it? Number two, you know how the Vice Chancellor talks about world class, you know, we want to move from excellent to world class universities. The way I define world class is, you know, comparable to world class standards. You know, if you don't compare yourself with, you know, world class standards, then you are not world class. So by using instruments that have been used, say, for students in the United States, and comparing that data with our students. We're not saying one is better or the other, but benchmarking to say, all right, because we'll never be able to match students in the United States in terms of what they have. We are in a different situation. But we'll be able to see what the data in the US shows and what the data shows here about what staff and students not just own, but what do they think about the integration or use of technology in teaching and learning. Then we can see, where do we stand? Where are we? What are we going to do about it? We don't have to necessarily behave like the Americans or do what the Americans do, but we can compare. That's what I think world class means when the VC talks about world class. So that's another initiative. Now, one last thing before I shut up is evaluation of the quality of teaching. One of the things that I've been looking at is looking at the existing questionnaire that the planning office sends out, and we have brought together a bunch of associate deans and people, and we've been looking at this over the last year. And a new questionnaire is soon to be going to the Teaching and Learning Committee, where you will see it, which captures the essence of what I'm talking about. So that, you know, we are collecting data not about teacher performance, how you're teaching, what your behavior is, what your manner is, but about the teaching. So collecting data on the teaching, not on the teacher. Of course, the teacher is implicated, but so that we can do something about the teaching. So focusing the questionnaire on the learning and teaching experience as opposed to the individual. And so we have rethought this questionnaire, and I mean, you know, it looks something like this, but let's not worry about the detail. So that's coming, and it will give us a bit more data. This is all in the same, in the ballpark of learning analytics. It's collecting data from students about their learning experience so that it can be used, and something could be done about teaching and learning. But a group of people have been looking at that, and you will get to see it when it comes to the various committees and through various processes. So one final thing, so what do we do? What are we going to do? There's a team, there's a lot of support services, there are lots of things happening. As I was saying, there's an Open Education Week, March 15th, at the Japan ICT Center. You'll hear more from Deepak about this. Come to it, you know. And another thing that I want to do is, I hope I can come to you again, we can come to you again, and talk about other things. One of the things I'm starting at CFL, like you have your lunchtime seminars and brown bags or whatever, a thing called TED Futures. Now TED is not the same TED that you might think that in the US. I'm talking about technology, education, and design, because I think those are the three pillars of what we do. We deal with technology, we're talking about education, and we're talking about design. Design is not the domain of architects and engineers alone. Every teacher, I believe, is a designer. Every day we design lessons, we design learning experiences. Design should be owned by the education people. Teaching is a design science, as I keep saying. You can contact us at CFL, and I have my people here, and we are here to help. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions now. Any queries, anything that I've said?
Well, thank you very much, Professor Naidu, for the very interesting presentation. And now I think the staff will ask anybody who has any questions to ask with clarification. Yes, Head of School of Social Sciences.
Thank you, thank you for your vigor and thank you for your rigor in your presentation. I appreciate that. There was one point I really appreciated that you made, the student survey. I appreciate that you're getting the input of the students, because these are the individuals who are affected most. And in this situation, they've been left out of the equation.
Yeah.
Their perspective has been left out of the equation.
That's right.
We need to hear what they feel about this change, this change in their life that has been sort of imposed upon them.
Exactly.
Because when I was advising, there were at least 3 or 4 students who came to me and they wanted to register. And I just said, well, just register. And they gave me a blank look. I said, just go online and register. And they gave me a blank look. And I contacted Appeal, and basically what happened, they did not know how to go online.
There you go.
They did not know how to get online. They did not know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
These are the individuals
Yeah.
who are going to get lost here. And if this is where they start, if this is their starting point,
Yeah.
you imagine them, they will always be behind.
Yeah, they'll always be behind.
So at some point, we have to recognize these students exist. Someone has to speak for them
And change the paradigm.
and and understand where they are and where they're coming from, and make some changes to help them get through this.
Yeah.
Because it just broke my heart.
Exactly. It
broke
goes
my
to the
heart when
ethos.
student- It just broke my heart when the students feel that they did not survive. It just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And I called the appeal. I said, the appeal, we got to fix this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have got to do something
About this.
Because these students need our support, need our help.
More than anybody else.
So I really appreciate you getting the students, understanding where they are.
Absolutely.
This-
A lot. See, the beauty of this is, and you included, my friend, you know, a lot of us in this room, or majority of us in this room, came out of that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We know it better.
Yes.
And if we ain't going to do it, then who's going to do it? Yeah?
Thank you.
So, I mean, you know, I keep going. It's a value principle. It's an ethos and culture. This is what the VC said to me on the weekend when I was chatting with him. He asked me to do something for the Minister of Education, because the Minister of Education a new Minister of Education in Fiji wanted something about e-learning capability of the University of South Pacific. And I got my people together and we wrote something down and said, I want to go to the Minister of Education in Fiji and say, USP is different from FNU. How can I separate USP from FNU? Because if you can't value add, then they will give the money to FNU. Why would they give? Why would? And this has been a bone of contention all along in the 50 years that USP is too much Fiji-centered. All right. So I think, you know, this idea of flexibility, of openness, of open scholarship is unique to us because this organization was set up that way. FNU wasn't set up that way. FIT wasn't. FSM wasn't. Fiji School of Agriculture wasn't. You went there, you studied there, you got qualified, you got out. It was a school in the traditional sense of the word. So we are sitting on, including the teachers' colleges. Lingam is shaking his head because we came out of the same background. We know this, right? So in a sense, you know, one of the reasons why I came back to work here, I don't know what Sudesh and other people think the same, is it's a privilege to be working in a situation like this where you can really make an impact, where help is needed, and to push the boundaries of learning and teaching. I would not be able to have this kind of a conversation in University of Melbourne because I'm not interested. Go away. I have my students here, they get 99% out of 100, you know, scores anyway. I'm doing my research, you know, students are studying, they're bright guys, they will all pass. Got the resources. But this is where we need it most. And if we don't step up and do something about, and I mean, there's value in it because we are pushing the boundaries. We're pushing the boundaries of learning and teaching, and other people will learn from us. We are the leaders in it anyway because we've got a track record of 50 years of doing this, you know?
Well, thank you. I think that's a real issue that has been raised by the head of school. How do we prepare our students? That's the question. How do we prepare our students, first-year students who come in to be able, you know, to go straight into our programs? So the preparation time is an issue. I've just received yesterday over 1,000 first-year students from SAS that we will be looking after, and Kapil will do that. We're already doing that. We will look at that and then, you know, run training. You know, we've been doing that for our faculty, but at least I have the data for the first-year students who are coming to the faculty because that is very critical. And the first-year coordinator, yes, he keeps James keeps on referring to Kapil. Is our first year student. We'll do that. We'll put in all their programs. That's what has been done over the 2 years. And then we'll also monitor the risk students. We have our student learning support, Shalendra and Anand. We're getting another 2 to help out in that. But that is one very little, one way in which we do it. But the biggest question for the university as an institution, this is just Fale. This happens in MBE, a bigger NFSDE, the same question, the same issue.
Yeah.
How does the university prepare students
Yeah.
who
Right.
Have not seen a tablet,
Right.
who have not seen and definitely touched the keyboard to be prepared, for our program. And here we're ready to go in. We've got our timetable and we've got 50, 60 more than that students, even 100 and something, 200 in some of the first year here.
See,
It's a real issue that we
I,
must tackle not only in this faculty but the university as a whole. Preparation for people who come in. So I think that's an issue that we note down and we need to be raised at the level that this should be raised. But the faculties can do what they have with the first years, and we're trying our best, to do that with the support. Now that we know what you have to offer and what support you have, so I think that is good. That is why we are here having this conversation this morning. Eric has got a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, James, for raising that question.
Sometimes when we think about alternatives to face-to-face teaching, we tend to get locked into thinking these days just about online.
right.
And I'm just wondering, to what extent is the university exploring strategies for those places where you've got very, very poor internet connections?
Sure.
And that's on my mind at the moment. I just come back from Tarawa. And a whole load of stuff I wanted to do on Moodle over the weekend, I gave up. It wasn't even worth trying. I discovered that in about 2 minutes. Now, we can take what we've got online. If you put a course online, you can take that course and you can download it onto flash drives. And people can work from flash drives.
That's right.
Now, but do we have strategies of that kind in place, and are we developing?
Absolutely. Val might be able to shed some light on that, but we are not shoving people down in one direction only. There's a whole range of blending and flexibility. Val, you want to say a few things?
Well, it's a dual issue between course development and our learning systems team as well. And we have been exploring the Moodle on a Stick idea from a couple of years back. I'm not sure what that project is.
Yeah. And don't wait, Eric, for somebody to do it. This is, I keep saying, I thought about this. The engine room is here, right? The strategies. You come up with the strategies and you come to us and say, baby, we want to do this. All right? We will find ways to help you do this. The ideas have to come from the teaching staff. No, not only one way. We can come up with ideas as well. But you are the subject matter expert. You know what is to be taught and what are the learning outcomes, isn't it? So we start from that position and then we say, all right, what is possible? Not everybody needs to be shoved down that online learning, technology intensive direction. What might work here might not work in Tarawa, as you said. But some things will work in Tarawa. And even in USP, if you think 50 years ago, what was here and what is it now? So we are all on a path, but we are moving at different paces and in different phases, isn't it? So, I think the answer to your question is yes.
I think connectivity is an issue that we will have to, that is one of the issues that was raised, it is raised everywhere. With the fiber connectivity with the countries in the region, that hopefully should ease. I think Samoa now is on that. Vanuatu, have you resolved that across the road cable going across to the Malas?
Perhaps, I don't know. It's better, we're getting better.
But there, Kiribati, when I was there, it was quite good. I think there's certain times when you experience, because I thought Kiribati was one of the best one when I went there. I didn't have any problem at all. There's certain times when they search, maybe like, there's too much traffic all at the same time. And this is why at Embalas it used to happen. People complain when they go there, Eric is here, there's no staff on the campus. And when I went there, there was staff there. And then I finally found out what the problem was. It was connectivity. Because, everybody, and they found that they could only be better connected if they went to their own homes or they use a hotel in town. And that's the same with all visiting lecturers. And then they could do their work from there. And yeah, BC was on my back about, why aren't the staff there? You know, I've been told that they are not there. So I finally found the issue, and I came back. It is connectivity.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and I think now we've addressed that because the optic cable
Yeah.
would actually address that.
Yeah.
Tonga, you know, has got that. And Marshall Islands, when
Yeah.
you go to Marshall Islands, you know, there's no difficulty there. And Samoa yesterday at SMT, they are on to that.
Yeah.
And Vanuatu has been at it because it has to do with government as well coming in
Yeah.
for them. In Vanuatu, it's just a matter of them, you know, digging a tunnel across to make the connectivity with the Malas. But I think that is on the way.
Yeah, yeah.
But Kiribati had no problem at some stage.
There you go.
So I think the connectivity will be there. But I
Yeah.
think the question that you asked, when you were stuck and you know that you're in the middle of having a conversation with the students, what do you do? What does an innovative teacher does when that happens? To me, that's a critical question.
Yeah.
You know, said, okay, we are here, we're stuck, you have a holiday, go to the beach and have a swim, or whatever. But, you know, are there some innovative ways, you know, because we know that peak season might happen.
Yeah.
You know, they-
I don't need to tell this group that teaching is both a science and an art. All right? There is a science to teaching. This is why I call it design science, you know, but there's an art and creativity to it, which is where art and creativity comes in. So, and I think that this group of people needs to propagate that idea, you know, and push that idea. It is also linked to this idea of the scholarship of teaching and learning, to think about teaching in those kinds of situations and how we can design teaching experiences where you are able to cope with these kinds of things, you know. I mean, so, as you're the dean, you're an SMT, I mean, is print out of the game, or we still need print?
Oh no, let's not go there. I don't want to discuss that because I have opposition that's coming, you know, everywhere regarding.
Well.
But you know, I think the School of Law at some stage, when they started their online, you know, over here, there was a huge cry. We want to go back to the print.
Yeah.
We want to go back to the print. So there was some form,
Yeah.
you know, some form
Yeah.
that helped them, and then now they fully.
But you know, the position that Eric was in, I mean, if the technology is completely dead and not working, and you want to push online learning down their throat, that's criminal. That's almost criminal, bordering on where we were. So, is there a place for some kind of a mix and match, you know, that the core material is available in hard copy form, but the interaction, communication, those things are available in online mode? That, you know, if, say, for example, you know, the technology fell apart, I can't do anything, I can't study because it's all online.
Well, we
What-
have the blended approach.
That's
is
it,
still
that's it.
there.
So we do.
The blended approach is still there. I think the online, well, it's the definition of that is 80% and 20%.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So they're still there. But I think Eric was saying there are times, you know, because law, you know, but now they're teaching face to face most of the law programs in Amalas.
Is online.
Eric as well. Yeah. There's certain times when that occurs, and it has occurred to quite a number of staff.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the question: are there alternatives? What do we do? What are the alternatives
Yeah.
way? Creative ways that you have maybe a kind of a software, something that CFL has developed that suddenly pops out of the software.
Easy answer. Do not forget how to write in longhand. Because yesterday I was reading an article on BBC, which was around the time of the Trojan War, when the greatest civilizations in the region, Greece, Syria, Egypt, etc. Except for Egypt, all the others collapsed after the war because of the crisis that led to the war course. And what was lost was also writing in some of these places, knowledge, because there were no keepers for the records. So if you imagine this, that if the digital world collapses and you can't write in longhand, what happens then? So I think it's very important to have that Som's idea that actually you need to actually keep a balance. You need to keep hold of the old that is useful whilst going with the new.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Let's, we have to move on. If anybody has got another question?
I just have one comment.
Yes.
My one comment is, yes, I said, I know when you, thank you for your presentation. I know when you started, you said, we're not here to talk about Moodle. But I have to say that nothing works unless the platform works. Because with all the policy, all the goodwill, all the everything else, we are the ones who are logging in, and we don't sit, as you know, we don't sit at our desks just going into Moodle, but in between our activities, and that goes for all of us, we try to access material. The students are trying to access material, and we're getting hundreds of emails saying, we don't know what to do. And it's not necessarily because they don't know how to use a computer, it's that they don't know, they are not able to access their online learning.
Yeah.
And we've been given the mandate that we have to go online. So when we are complying and we don't get the tool, in this case, which is the platform, we're stuck. So I've practically wasted up most of this week because I haven't been able to go online.
Yeah. Varun might say a couple of things. I mean, technology will get better. You know, we've got to persevere. The inside story is, again, Varun, I'm not taking words out of mouth. We've moved on to a new version, and there's an overload of students. The first few weeks, you know, connectivity is poor. It's unfortunate. This is the dichotomy that we are in. You and I can pay $40 in Australia and have unlimited access, or in the US for anything, any amount of data. You know how much we have to pay here? Where it should be free, it is most expensive. Data should be free here. But why we can't access YouTube and Facebook at this university? Because these developed world is charging us gazillions of dollars for access. Now, unless I can't change this, I don't know who's going to change this, but unless that changes, we are going to be stuck in that paradigm.
But you see, the argument is, if for us, we have our degrees and we're all, you know, cute and comfortable, but for a student who's paid money, they're experiencing serious angst. They're frustrated. They're panicking because exam is just down the road. Assignments are down the road, and I can't access my materials, and I'm tearing my hair out. I don't know what to do. I have no options. That's what we are giving people, and I think the service isn't good enough.
Okay, not good enough. Yeah, we heard that, and people are actually working 24 hours a day. Hey, Varun, trying to make sure that this thing is working. But I think, and your point is right. You know, I've heard also that some of the equipment in ITS is pretty old. Some of the servers are very old.
Yes.
Capable. Now listen, if this university is going to be serious about their
I
dean.
think yesterday that was raised.
Yes.
They are now changing a lot of equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, that is on the road.
Okay.
I think the issue here is actually Moodle.
Okay.
You know, and I think a lot of staff are experiencing. Every time you change something on Moodle, the whole community should be aware that you are changing, that there are changes in Moodle, and you know, this is what is happening. The communique is very critical, you know, that everybody is informed about things. That's why, you know, we go in a big way to provide the communique about ALSA, and I said, let it flash across, you know, flash across the website every 5 minutes, so that the whole community is aware. So I think, you know, I think you're now chairing the elite group or whoever is doing it.
I am.
And every start of the year, I have complaints from my staff about Moodle, and even students write to me about Moodle. It's about the platform Moodle, which is being used, and every time there's changes, you know, my staff are not informed.
Okay.
You know, I think that's the point. There's some practical things that this is an only opportune time to do it. Whenever there's any changes in Moodle, please let the staff be involved, can communicate those out, so that this is what is happening. And then the staff can then let the students know this is what it is.
Okay.
Because, you know, the other thing is, okay, just a moment. The campus of Bella shouldn't have any issue, and yet we're having issues here. It's the campuses, you know, that we are finding a lot of problems with. I used to have, you know, we used to have with Eric a lot of issues with MLS, but you know that has been maintained. You know, it has gone down, but you know, Sean is listening from there. There's still, you know, some issues that come up every now and then, and so But I think it's a model.
We heard you. This is why Varun and I are going to take care of that. We're going to make sure more information goes out, like we did just this morning. But I think even that email, Varun should have had a bit more information, a bit more detail, without having to go in the technical bits to say, okay, this is what's going on. Those guys were working all night last night.
It's simple because there are a lot of lay people. I think what is important is simple so that we will understand what.
Well, not my watch. I'll make sure that happens. Yeah,
no, but I think you chair elite. Groups.
I tell.
Or whatever it is.
I tell.
Yeah. Okay. I tell. Okay. So anyway, this is not a criticism. This is an issue.
No, I got you.
We are raising the issue because
we got you.
We've had.
This is.
And I think it's very important. Your point is very important about student angst and students' emotion, because you have to wonder what that does to their performance.
Yeah.
What is that, James?
Right? What is that?
We operating on a timeline. A
Yes,
semester is a timeline. You miss 1 week and 2 weeks.
Okay, can we have this conversation and we will put this all together and then we'll send you. I think it is important that you have a look at some of the issues that have been raised. This is, we've gone on in the operational bit, but I think this morning is very important that we know. Thank you very much for that. We know what is CFL doing, and thank you for your staff. We have a lot of staff that we've worked with over the years, and I would just like to thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your 2 policies. Policies which was accepted by
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Staff as well.
Yeah.
And thank you, Val. I would like particularly to thank you. You've worked with us when you're online in our conversion. That all the best. We will not be seeing you, but this afterward, I think you're welcome to the tea this morning because we're going to have the tea, all of us. You're welcome to share with us.
I think it's going to change. I think it's going to change.
Thank you very much. Let's give a hand to all the staff.
There you go.
Thank you.